My wife's parents made me sign a prenup to protect their money. However, it saved me when my wife won the lottery. I'm 35. I grew up in a modest home in the suburbs, you know the kind. 3 bedrooms, always smelling like fresh laundry and whatever mom was cooking that day. My parents weren't rich, but we were comfortable. After high school, I worked various jobs, bartending, helping at my uncle's hardware store, and eventually managing a local sporting goods shop. Nothing glamorous, but honest work that paid the bills. Then I met Clara. She came from a completely different world, one of luxury cars, multiple properties, and lavish parties. Her parents, Victor and Victoria, not their real names, but they fit, were exactly what you'd expect from old money. Victor was this tall, imposing figure who could dominate any room without saying a word. Victoria had perfected the art of subtle disapproval. One raised eyebrow from her could make anyone shrink into themselves. When Clara and I started dating, her parents tolerated me with thinly veiled disdain. But when we got engaged after 3 years together, that's when the real games began. They saw me as an intruder, a threat to their carefully guarded wealth. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags, but love has a way of blinding you. The manipulation around the prenup was subtle at first. Victor would invite me to his study for casual chats that felt more like interrogations. He'd tell stories about friends whose children had married gold diggers who took everything in the divorce. Victoria would make comments at dinner about how love is beautiful, but security is essential. They'd drop hints about other couples they knew who'd signed prenups and how it strengthened their relationships. Then came the pressure. They started delaying wedding preparations, claiming they couldn't move forward until certain matters were settled. Clara would come home crying after private conversations with her mother, telling me how her parents were threatening to withhold their blessing and financial support for the wedding. They even suggested they might cut her off from her trust fund if we didn't protect the family's interests. I remember the day Victor first presented the prenup. He'd invited me to their mansion, yes, actual mansion, under the pretense of a family dinner. Instead, I found myself alone with him in his wood-paneled study, staring at a thick document while he explained how this was just a formality and standard practice in families like theirs. When I hesitated, the tactics escalated. They started inviting me to more family events, but each one felt like a setup. They'd parade around their wealthy friends who would conveniently share stories about marriages ruined by money disputes. Victoria would pull me aside to show me family heirlooms, then pointedly mention how they needed to stay in the family. The document itself was cunningly crafted. It protected their family's existing wealth and any future inheritances or gifts, standard stuff. But there was this clause about joint assets and windfalls that seemed almost throwaway at the time. Any major asset we acquired together during the marriage would be considered marital property, including things like lottery winnings. I found it odd they'd include that specifically, but I was too focused on the parts about their family wealth to really think about it. The signing day was surreal. All of us gathered in Victor's study like it was some kind of business meeting. Victoria served coffee in delicate cups that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Clara stood off to the side, unusually quiet, while her father slid the document across his mahogany desk with a fountain pen that probably cost more than my car. I signed, thinking it was just about protecting their family money. We married 6 months later by a lake in a ceremony that made my parents feel out of place with its extravagance. The first couple of years were okay, though there were always undercurrents of tension. We lived in a condo her parents helped us buy. Their gift came with strings attached, of course. I contributed to the mortgage monthly, trying to prove I wasn't after their money. Then came the lottery ticket. Clara won $9 million from a random gas station ticket, and everything changed. She didn't call me first, she called her parents. They must have remembered that prenup clause about windfalls, because suddenly Clara was filing for divorce and kicking me out of our condo. That day started like any other. I came home from work one day to find her and her aunt going through our things. "Oh good, you're home," Clara said, not even looking up from the drawer she was rifling through. Her voice was eerily casual, like she was about to tell me we needed milk from the store. "I'm filing for divorce. You need to pack your things and leave." I stood there, keys still in hand, trying to process what I was hearing. "What, Clara, what are you talking about?" My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. She finally looked at me, her face a mask of cold indifference I'd never seen before. "The condo's in my name. Dad's down payment, remember. You need to be out by the weekend." Just like that, 3 years of marriage reduced to a real estate transaction. I tried reasoning with her, begging her to explain what was happening. All she would say was that things weren't the same anymore, and she was tired. The woman I'd shared my life with, who'd cried with joy at our wedding, now couldn't even look me in the eye. It wasn't until 2 days later that I got the real story. A mutual friend who worked at the gas station near our condo pulled me aside. "Did you know," he asked, his face twisted with discomfort, "about the lottery ticket?" That's when everything clicked. Clara had won big, really big, and instead of celebrating with me, she and her family had decided to cut me out entirely. They thought the prenup would protect them, forgetting that one crucial clause about windfalls being marital property. The same document they'd forced me to sign to protect their wealth had become my lifeline. I was devastated. I called my father, voice shaking, barely able to explain what had happened. My father urged me to stay calm and get a lawyer outside their social circle. I spent a few nights at my parents' house, trying to process everything while my mother ranted about how she'd never trusted my in-laws. Dad, practical as always, contacted an old friend who practiced family law. The lawyer's reaction when he read the prenup was priceless. He actually laughed. They'd shot themselves in the foot, he said. That specific language about lottery winnings being marital property meant I was entitled to a substantial portion. Their own prenup, meant to protect their wealth from me, was now protecting me from them. The next few weeks were intense. Victor left threatening voicemails, warning me to back off. Victoria tried cornering me outside my parents' house, offering insultingly low settlements if I'd just disappear quietly. They started spreading rumors about me being a gold digger who'd preyed on their innocent daughter. But I stood firm. My boss at the sporting goods store had my back when Victor tried to get me fired. My lawyer filed motions to freeze the lottery funds so they couldn't hide them. Clara stayed hidden away at her parents' house, letting her lawyers do all the talking. My lawyer and I spent countless hours preparing, reviewing every document until my eyes burned. We had a mountain of evidence: utility bills, grocery receipts, mortgage payments, and text messages where Clara herself acknowledged our joint expenses. But our ace in the hole was that prenup clause about windfalls. My attorney kept pointing to one critical sentence: "All financial windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winnings, shall be considered marital assets unless expressly designated otherwise." The irony was almost poetic. The preliminary status conference a week before the main hearing gave us our first taste of victory. Clara showed up flanked by her parents and what looked like an entire law firm, 4 attorneys plus a financial advisor. They strutted in with that familiar air of superiority, but their smug expressions cracked when my lawyer simply produced the prenup and highlighted the lottery clause. The judge ordered all assets frozen until the main hearing, and I caught the flash of panic in Victor's eyes. Victoria cornered me outside the courthouse that afternoon, trying to play the reasonable mediator. She offered a settlement that was insultingly low, calling it generous for someone of your background. When I refused, her mask of civility slipped. "You're destroying this family," she hissed, as if I was the one who'd orchestrated this whole mess. The morning of the final hearing arrived with a weight of inevitability. My parents came with me for support, though they waited outside the courtroom. Inside, Clara sat next to Victor, both of them wearing expressions that could have frozen hell. Victoria lingered at the back, arms crossed, watching everything like a hawk. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen every trick in the book, wasted no time getting started. Clara's lead attorney went first, trying to paint me as basically a squatter who'd contributed nothing meaningful to the marriage. They argued the lottery ticket was Clara's personal purchase, but stumbled when we produced bank records showing she'd used our joint account. The tension in the room shifted palpably when that evidence came out. The judge asked them directly if they had any proof it was Clara's personal funds. They fumbled, throwing out weak excuses about accidental card usage and claiming Victor had made the deposits. But the bank statements clearly showed both our names. The real drama started when Clara took the stand. Under questioning, she admitted she hadn't told me about the lottery win, that she'd consulted her parents first, and that the divorce filing came immediately after. When my lawyer asked her to explain why she'd used our joint account for the ticket if she considered it separate property, she stumbled. I didn't think about it. It was just convenient." The judge's disapproval was visible. She'd seen right through their attempts to twist the very agreement they'd forced on me years ago. By midday, it was clear which way things were heading. Victor must have sensed it too, because his lawyers started throwing everything at the wall, trying to argue about prenup intent, clause interpretation, anything they could think of. The final ruling was decisive. The judge declared the lottery winnings were clearly marital assets under the prenup's explicit language. She criticized their attempt to hide the win and rush the divorce, calling it evidence of bad faith. She ordered not just a substantial split of the lottery money, but also reimbursement for my condo contributions. The look on Victor's face was thunderous as he muttered, "This is far from over," while storming past me outside the courtroom. But his usual intimidating presence seemed diminished somehow. Victoria stood frozen, her perfect posture finally cracking. Clara just sat there, tears running down her face, though I couldn't tell if they were from regret or rage. Their lawyers immediately started talking about appeals, but I could see they knew it was hopeless. The prenup language was too clear, their actions too transparent. They'd tried to use their wealth and connections to bulldoze over me, forgetting that sometimes the law actually works the way it's supposed to. As I left the courthouse with my lawyer, I felt a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. The battle was largely over, though I knew there would be weeks of paperwork ahead to finalize everything. But the hard part, standing up to their intimidation, proving my right to marital assets, exposing their manipulation, that was done. And I'd won, using the very document they'd forced me to sign as my shield. I gave up my claim to the condo in exchange for a clean break. The settlement wasn't half the jackpot, but it was enough to help my parents upgrade their home and set myself up comfortably. Clara stayed under her parents' wing, her reputation in their social circle tarnished by the whole fiasco. The irony isn't lost on me. The very document they'd forced me to sign to protect their wealth ended up being my salvation. They started this war by trying to leave me with nothing, but their own weapon turned against them. I'm back to a simpler life now, but I'm stronger and wiser. Let them remember me as the guy who used their own prenup against them. They started the war, but I finished it. Sometimes I wonder if Clara ever really loved me, or if I was just another acquisition her parents needed to control. But I've made peace with it all. The money's nice, sure, but the real victory was standing up to their bullying and manipulation. I may have lost my marriage, but I kept my dignity and got a pretty nice consolation prize in the process. The aftermath of everything was more complex than I expected. The first few months after the settlement were a strange mix of victory and emptiness. I'd won, yes, but I'd also lost what I thought was the love of my life. The money sat untouched in my account for weeks while I processed everything that had happened. Friends and family had different reactions. Some congratulated me on standing up to the manipulation, while others thought I should have taken the high road and settled for less. A few of Clara's friends even reached out secretly to tell me they were glad I'd fought back. Apparently, her parents had a history of controlling their children's spouses through money. Sometimes I drive past their mansion and see Clara's car in the driveway. I feel a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what could have been if money hadn't poisoned everything, but relief that I discovered their true nature before we had kids or built more of a life together. Life's taught me some valuable lessons through all this. Money doesn't make you better than anyone else. Love without trust is meaningless, and sometimes the most expensive contracts can have the most unexpected outcomes. I'm building a new life now on my terms without manipulation or control. It's simpler, yes, but it's real, and that's worth more than any lottery jackpot.